Hi, I'm Stephanie McHenry from Instagram's Bake Your Feelings, the most meaningful place on the planet, where we take life experiences and we put them into pie. And what better way to honor that experience of Thanksgiving than with a gratitude-themed apple hand pie that actually looks like a thank you note placed on each of the plates of your loved ones. I couldn't imagine something more romantic, frankly. And I'm such a sappy person. I'm like obsessed with parchment paper and old inkwells and all that stuff. There's something about this that reminds me of something timeless that we get to remember and stick it in a pie, which is what I'm always here to do. So that's what we get to do together today. So first things first, we're going to start with the apple pie filling. Now, why is that important? I'm going to add all the sugar and the salt that we intend for that filling now, because what that's going to do is it's going to pull all those nummy apple juices, and then I'll know exactly how much liquid we're dealing with. With that power, I can avoid a lot of problems. I can make sure I add enough thickener or flour and avoid a soggy bottom pie later, or don't add too much and end up with a very dry, jammy pie. Unless that's your thing, because I'm not a pie snob, I'm a pie ambassador. I want you to be able to enjoy your pie the way that you enjoy it. It's all about preference, not right or wrong. So, with that power in mind, we're going to make this a beautiful pie exactly the way we like it. Now check out the size of these guys. Everyone see that? Check out the size of these. And this is key because I want to pack in that apple goodness as much as I can. If I chose big chunks of apple, you get a good hefty bite of apple now and then, but you get more air pockets between them. If I want to pack in the apple nice and tight, I cut them smaller. So shy of shredding these suckers, this is going to make a very apple-y pie. I'm going to add the sugar, which I've already mixed up. I got my white sugar and my brown sugar mixed together just for convenience, that's all. And the salt. And I'm just evening out the distribution, and I'm going to let them sit for at least 30 minutes. That'll give it time for the sugar and the salt to work on those apples and get them ready for us. I love this smell. This is one of my favorite smells on the planet. Right after bread baking, rain, gardenias, my daughter when she was really, really little. But right after those, this is right there. So this is mixed up. I'm going to set it off to the side and I'm going to let it sit for at least 30 minutes. That way the salt and the sugar will do its magic on those apples, pulling out the juices, and it'll be delicious and easy to be able to work with and add the right amount of thickener that I talked about. We've got the sugar and the salt working its magic over on the apples. We're going to pop over to the crust and get that ready. So first things first, I'm going to use a food processor. The reason why I want to use a food processor is because we're going to get really ornate with the decorations. If you have big chunks of fat deposits, aka butter, you're going to have bigger flakes. And that is going to warp and mutate the look that we're going for here. So I'm going to do it as fine as possible, and the food processor makes it so that I can get as much consistency as we possibly can. If you don't have a food processor at home, don't worry, you can still do this. You get a pastry cutter and you just spend a lot of time patiently doing it. But you can do this no matter what tools you have. So, popping over to the food processor, first thing we're going to do is grab the flour and the salt, which I already have mixed together with the whisk. You can also do it with a sifter if you want a very thorough blend. Either way, it's going to come out beautifully if you just mix them all together. All right. This is exactly the moment that I fear where I lose my patience and it just goes everywhere. So I'm taking my time, slowly moving this guy in there. You do not have to do this at home. This is me just being really careful so I don't miss any of the goodness that I measured out and put in there. Speaking of measuring while I'm getting this in there, you'll hear all of us fancy food people talking about the importance of using a scale. Here's a secret about why. When you're measuring out your flour in cups, it's going to weigh different depending on if it was dense and sitting in that tub or if you mixed it up and fluffed it before measuring it in your cups, because the density is going to change the weight, but it's not going to change the volume. So if you want to know how much flour you're actually using, you weigh it. So I weighed this in advance. And the next thing I'm going to do is grab the butter, which I have chilling in the fridge. And this is why this is so important. The golden rule of making any pie crust is to make it cold and bake it hot. Because we all love a flaky crust, right? And to do that, we need to keep the butter chilled so that it stays intact. And when the hot air from the oven blasts it, it evaporates very quickly and it leaves a footprint, an empty spot where that fat deposit used to be, AKA a flake. So the more you want those flakes, the more you want that butter chilled until you, bam, hit it with the oven and the heat and zap it so that you have just a memory of where the fat was and a flake to enjoy instead. Grabbing that butter. I've chopped this up into 1/2-inch cubes, but it doesn't really matter. It's going in the food processor, and that food processor is going to mix it and cut it with the flour and salt until it gets this wonderful sandy texture that's perfect for decor-focused crusts like we have here with our thank you note envelopes and our little wax seals and all that. It's just so dang cute. There's one other secret when we're adding the butter. I want to make sure that every piece gets coated in the flour. Why? Because it'll keep them from sticking together, which could make bigger lumps of flake than I want. So I'm separating them as I go. And I like to keep chopsticks around because the blades scare the crud out of me. Not gonna lie, even now, 20 years later of cooking, knives scare the crap out of me. You know, butter isn't the only fat you can use either. You can use shortening, you can use lard, you can use cream cheese, you can use nut butters, you can use oils. I love olive oil in my crusts. Get a nice sandy flake from that too. You have options. When I make these, I picture all my loved ones who took a break from their incredibly busy lives for one day to be together, and how personal and meaningful it's going to be when they look on their plate and they see their own personal thank you note hand pie. It's tasty, it's beautiful, but the most important thing for me is how meaningful it is. I'd rather be not just full, but meaningful. Thanks, I'll be here all week. Tip your waitresses. There we go. Separate, separate, separate. These guys like to hang out together. I also like using a food processor because I have hot hands. If you tend to run hot and we're trying to keep that butter chilled, you are going to prefer using a machine to touch these guys rather than your hands as much as possible. So if your hands run hot, use a processor, use a mixer, avoid touching it, and re-chill as often as you need to. Okay, my favorite part, let's make some sand. Yahtzee. She's looking beautiful. In fact, at this point, it looks a lot like there isn't butter in there anymore, but there is, and I need to get it in a bowl and get it mixed up with chilled water as quickly as possible so that it doesn't start melting and becoming room temperature. I want to keep them intact. So I'm setting this off to the side. I'm grabbing my mixing bowl, dump. Got some stragglers hanging on for dear life. All right, this is the part that tends to scare people, and I'm going to demystify it for you. This is one of my favorite parts. I get to play with my hands and feel like I'm a kid in kindergarten playing with the Play-Doh. And if my kid was here, they would say it is Play-Doh. They constantly use crusts as edible Play-Doh while I was making pies, and it was one of the most freaking adorable things ever. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna scoop these out to the side and make a little well. What I want to avoid doing is jumping to a kneading motion. That's for bread, not for crust. We want to keep the hydration levels, the water that we're going to add, moving into the flour. Here, come here, take a peek at this. I want you to see it. It's moving around, but that hole in the middle, that's where we're going to pour our water and make a little well. And we're going to toss it rather than kneading it so that we don't treat it like bread. We're going to treat it like we only want to get the flour wet and even out that hydration, breaking up the chunky pieces as we go. So I've got my well. I've got my chilled water. I put ice in this, it's melted, so I've got cold water without any ice cubes getting in the way. That would mess up the hydration levels of a crust. It's just right. And we're going to add the amount specified in the recipe. But really, this is the part that scares people, because you read a recipe and you add the exact amount of water and it could come out different for you where you're cooking than it could someone else. If you're at a higher elevation, you tend to need more hydration, more heat in the oven, and more cook time. But you can't always specify exactly how much more, because I don't know what level of altitude you're at when you're making this. So we start with the bare minimum amount and then add 1 tablespoon at a time until the texture's right. And I'm going to show you exactly what the texture needs to look like so that you always get a consistent outcome per your desires. So I'm pouring water in that well. I'm using my hands to just toss it very loosely. I'm not even bringing my fingers together. I'm just bringing the outside of that flour towards the center with that well of water and tossing like a salad. Make another well, add some more. We know the texture's right when we don't have bits of flour dusting off of it, but it's also not too shiny and soppy sounding. If we don't exactly know the right balance and we want to lean one way or another, lean towards a little too much water, because it's easy to add flour and correct that later. If you have dry dough, it's really hard to fix that when it comes time to roll. So I'm still just tossing, and as I go, you see this, how you have chunks that are starting to stick together? That's partly why I love using my hands. I can feel that and make sure that the hydration is evenly distributed by taking them, breaking them apart, and then bringing it back together as I go. This is starting to get a little stickier, which is great. I'm getting close. Just a tablespoon at a time until it's right. Lots of hydration bits to separate. I love this process. It really makes me feel like I'm baking. I'm not just throwing together a box of something. I get to celebrate the experience of getting my hands dirty and putting this all together and thinking of what their faces are going to look like when they see their little envelopes on their plates. I can't wait. Especially when it's so easy to do. All right, we're just about there. I'll show you. But I'm starting to just squeeze my hands to bring it together like I'm picking out a cantaloupe at the grocery store. Just gentle squeeze. Bringing it together but not kneading it. I've got just the right level of hydration. I'm going to plop this on the counter so that you can see it. Okay. Love it. That is a beautiful crust. It is coming together without a ton of dust from the flour falling off of it, which would indicate it's too dry, but also not shiny like there's lots of water reflecting in the light. Right in between is our happy place where we know we did a great crust. All right, I'm gonna wash my hands. I'm gonna gather this up. I'm gonna make 2 discs of dough out of this. I'm gonna flatten it and make it about 1 inch or so thick. We're gonna wrap it up airtight. And we do that to make sure that it stays hydrated properly, because if you don't, the air will get into it and suck all the moisture out, which we just worked so hard to get just right. So wrap it airtight and chill it for at least 30 minutes, if not an hour. We want it to bind a little bit from the cold, not from us kneading it. I've got my bench scraper. I'm going to split this in half, gather it up, plop it in there. I'm not worrying too much about the shape. I can shape it once it's in the plastic wrap. Just needs to be airtight. There we go. So I'm just tapping on the sides to bring it together and then flattening on the top. Now I've got my dough disc ready to pop in the oven and chill for 30 minutes at least, if not an hour. That's chilling, and we have one that I went through the exact same process for, chilled and ready for us to roll out. You want to feel like a fancy chef and get a better distribution of your flour? Do it up here. This feels like taboo. Like my kid grabbed the flour and is throwing it everywhere, but you actually get to, so it's more fun. All right, got that guy on the lightly floured surface. I'm doing the top and spreading it out, hitting the board again, and then grabbing my favorite rolling pin. I like rotating it as I go. That helps me make sure that I'm keeping it from sticking to the board and all that flour underneath is distributing around. It's really stinky when you're stuck to the table and you have to get your bench scraper and scrape it back out. So rotate a bit. I can tell that it's sticking a little bit on top because it's rolling with me, getting stuck to the rolling pin. So I keep a little pile of flour right off to the side and I slap it with my hand and then run it on the rolling pin so that I can keep going really quickly and not spend as much time sprinkling it about. And it makes me feel like an American Ninja Warrior, but in a pie kind of way, where I'm constantly thinking of more efficient, BA ways to do things. Okay, the goal here as I roll is to start from the center and work my way out. For these shapes, normally for a pie we'd be working on a circle, but because our final outcome that we're targeting is sort of a rectangle, I'm focusing on creating a rectangle here. So it's more forward and back and side to side strokes rather than a full clock of directions. Come here, you. There we go. See how fast that was? These things aren't small. They make me so happy how efficient things get. Almost there. I'm doing this pretty thin, about 1/4 inch. There we go. And they don't have to be a certain size. We just want as much consistency as possible. It looks like I can get about 2 10-inch by 10-inch squares, and that works great for getting roughly that size that we had before. This guy. And once I do one, I can use it as a model if I want, but I really only need 10 inches. So, got my pastry cutter. I've got a fluted side and I've got an unfluted side. Because we want clean lines like an envelope, we're going to use the unfluted side. I'm going to split this guy in half. And then I'm going to cut my squares. And you notice I'm just eyeballing this, but you're welcome to use a ruler, whatever serves. They look fancy, but they just roughly have to be a square. We can hide anything uneven as we fold a little bit, so there's a lot of forgiveness in this. Like there should be at Thanksgiving anyway. A lot of forgiveness. Especially my kid putting up with me. Please forgive me for playing ABBA really loud when picking you up from school. The apples that were sitting over here getting all juicy. Look at all that liquid. Can you guys see this? You get nice and close on that? It's a brown puddle of deliciousness. Now I know exactly how much thickener to add to avoid that becoming a soggy bottom in our pie. All you have to do is add the rest of the ingredients, Stick it on the stove on medium to low heat for about 5 to 10 minutes. And you know you're done when the juice becomes thick and syrupy, like honey. And it's reduced in volume just a little bit. The flour, the butter. Come on, butter, you know you want to go. The spices, the lemon juice. Stir this guy up. Ooh, it smells so good. 1 teaspoon of this guy. Oh, do yourselves a favor, get the really good vanilla. The one that doesn't smell like alcohol, it actually smells like vanilla. That is a whole other kind of heaven in my nose right now. An olfactory system nirvana, in fact. Just a teaspoon splash. Get that medium-low heat going. Stir it up. And keep half an eye on it while you go get that crust ready. There we go. All right. Now, while that's cooking, I already have some pre-made chilled apple pie filling, exactly following that process, ready to go so we can assemble our thank you note envelope hand pies. Grab a spoon. Ah, cinnamon. Okay, top 7 smells. 6 is hazel. No, 6 was, I like a lot of smells. This one smells amazing. Oh, goodness. Okay. I'm getting about a half a cup-ish, and I'm laying it about 1 inch thick off of the pastry at a diagonal so that when it comes time to fold, I'm folding the diamond of the square, not the blunt sides of the square. So corners coming into the center. I've got roughly about a 3x4 by 1 inch deep pile of cooked apple pie filling. And then watch this. This is so fun and easy. Everyone looks at those and thinks it's so complicated, but you get a big bang for your buck in terms of effort versus overall look. All I'm doing is bringing the side corners into the center and overlapping them by about a half an inch or so. What really matters to me is making sure that the sides are straight like an envelope. And I'm going to take my dry pastry brush and get rid of all the excess flour because I'm going to paint it with an egg wash later and I don't want it gunking it up. It's already so cute. All right, bringing the bottom up to the top. This totally reminds me of those pajamas with the butt flap. Just FYI, enjoy that. Brought this up from the bottom. I'm evening out any bits that don't want to look like an envelope, but all I'm doing is just picking it up and bringing it to center, overlapping where I crossed in the center before with the sides. Hitting that with a pastry brush as well because we got a lot of flour dust from that counter and I don't want too much. Last but not least, the top coming straight down. Look at that. Truly like an envelope. What could be more cute? Ugh. All right, next. And this is fun. Not required, but fun. I have all this extra dough, all these scraps and bits. And like I mentioned before, you can cook them up, you can throw them on top of your ice cream, you can break them up and stick them on top of your pie like crumble or streusel or something. But today I'm going to make a little wax seal, like it's a really antiquated, old school envelope that someone had to stamp with their crest. So, where is it? There it is. Just using a bottle cap, little small circle to make it look like a little wax seal. You could do any other cutouts. I have these great stamps that I brought up. I've got leaves that you can do. You can buy these easily online. You just press down really hard and then punch the top to get the impression in it and release it, and you add it on top. I can do several of these just so you can see. Pushing that down. It's in there. Pop the top down. Gives it the impression. And use it to pop it out. Come here, you. There he is. And all of a sudden I've got a little leaf with all the little designs and everything. It makes life so much easier and faster if I'm making a ton of these for a ton of guests. You could put that right there and it would look so fall beautiful and harvesty good. Or you could do a heart and make it even more literal of this metaphorical pie, showing the heart and love that you put into making it and the gratitude you have for your loved ones. I'm getting emotional. Okay. I love this stuff. So I am just doing a simple wax seal, popping it out. Again, this was just a bottle cap type thing I had around, and it's gonna go there. But right now it's too floury to stick together. We're gonna skip over to our egg wash now. And all I've done is take an entire whole egg and beaten it with my fork. I added a teaspoon or so of water to thin it out and keep it from being really gloppy. I want a thin glaze to show off the pie, not an omelet cooked into the corners of my envelope. So, got another little paintbrush. I'm gonna just lightly paint it. It gives it that shine of professionalism. And it helps it bind together. She is painted and she's going to be shiny and beautiful. And now this little wax seal circle guy is going to stick. Overlap it right there and paint that too. So cute. Cute as a button, you could say. Ha ha! Ha ha! Yeah, okay. So, I'll show myself out. This is done. She's beautiful. We've got a little wax seal. She's folded. The sides are nice and even. I can use my bench scraper, put her on a cookie sheet with some parchment paper, and bake her to perfection. Okay, she's ready to go. I'm gonna get my cookie sheet. These guys are done. I'll stick them over here. Oh, so cute. So cute. And she goes right there. There we go. The parchment paper, the envelope, the wax seal, shining with that egg wash, ready to go. And I just repeat that process until every one of my loved ones has a thank you note pie ready to go.